Yo, what's up, dudes? Chad Kakis here. Dudes, thank you so much for stopping by. And today we have some very useful information because this upcoming week is going to be one of the most important weeks in Destiny history when it comes to improving your character. Now, why? Well, as you can see right here, there's going to be double Nightfall the Ordeal rewards for Lake of Shadows. Lake of Shadows being one of the easiest and fastest Nightfalls to complete, and you have double rewards on top of that, so your chances for farming absolute god tier legendary armor pieces are higher than ever before. And therefore, I thought it would be a good idea to go over the 5 most desirable Titan exotic armor pieces. These are what you should look for, and we're also going to be talking about the best stat rolls to keep an eye out for as well. And so, let's get started. But just before we do, a huge amount of people watching are not yet subscribed. Take a moment to click that subscribe button and ring that bell to be notified of content like this much more often, and you can always unsubscribe later. Alright, now let's talk about these exotics. By the way, I will be releasing a video on the best loadouts and the best strategies to farm this Nightfall efficiently. When it's done, it'll be linked up above, but again, we're just talking rewards in this video. So let's start here right away at number 5 in the list, and that has got to be the One-Eyed Mask. This thing is phenomenal. Now, the exotic perk is Vengeance. Highlights enemies who dare to damage you, track down, and destroy your enemy for an overshield. Remember, this video is for people who aren't usually farming the heck out of GMs and don't have a million high stat roll exotics already. But if you get a high stat rolled One-Eyed Mask, you can use that in the Crucible and it will always be good. This thing has been nerfed like 2 or 3 times and it's still amazing. The fact that you can win a gunfight and get an overshield for doing so means that whoever you stumble across next is at a disadvantage. They're gonna have to not only fight you, but fight you not just full health, but with an overshield. That is very, very powerful, and it is one of the most used exotics for Titans in the Crucible for that reason. I also want to point out that every time I get kind of lazy and I just leave this thing on when I do a random PvE activity, I'm always surprised by just how effective it is. I mean, you can see in the background gameplay, every time I kill one of those glowing red highlighted enemies that has damaged me, I gain an overshield, so I'm gaining an overshield in PvE just constantly. So I think it's actually kind of underrated in non-Crucible activities. But what stats are you looking for with this thing? Well, resilience is actually pretty good on this because not only is it going to increase your overall health, but it gives you your class ability energy back for Titan. Normally you'd want to go for recovery, but with the One-Eyed Mask, because it functions to heal you when you win a gunfight, you don't need it as much. And then discipline, intellect, strength are all pretty good with this thing. You're just looking for kind of a high overall stat total distribution. Alright, now let's move on to number 4 on the list, and that is the Syntheseps exotic gauntlets. So, the exotic perk here is Biotic Enhancements, increased melee lunge range, improved melee and super damage when you're surrounded. So, this exotic is great for both PvE and PvP. You will see a lot of people run this in the Crucible because it's cracked. Like, that increase to your melee lunge range is so good for PvP. It lets you win so many fights because you get the first melee off. The other guy isn't even within range and you're already damaging him. Then he's gonna melee you back, and then you hit him with the second melee, he's already dead. And with a lot of Titan subclasses, I'm thinking specifically the Striker bottom tree, that is incredibly powerful with this thing. And also the increased damage does come up occasionally as well, but that increase to damage is much more for PvE. There, it's really, really effective because you are gonna see biotic enhancements pop up on the side of your screen all the time because you are constantly surrounded in PvE activities. Like, every activity throws trash mobs at you. So that increase to your super damage happens all the time, and it's a pretty significant increase. It's something like 50%. So doing 50% more damage with your hammers, with the Striker Titan, and with the upcoming Stasis Behemoth subclass as well, that is a very close range super. It's going to be very good with this exotic. Now, what stats should you look for? Well, firstly, recovery as always is really important, especially if you're playing more aggressively and making the most of that melee lunge range. You want good recovery, but that means you also want good strength so you get your melee back more often. The lunge will work even if you don't have a charged melee, but obviously you'd rather have your melee at the ready. And then also, intellect if you're planning to use these and gain that biotic enhancements bonus in PvE quite a bit. Obviously you want your super quite a bit. But it's time to move on to the number 3 choice, and that is the Armamentarium. So the exotic perk here is pretty simple. It's called And Another Thing, and you just gain an additional grenade charge. Now the reason this is pretty high on this list is because you cannot go wrong with the Armamentarium. It is just such a good and versatile exotic. Gaining an additional grenade is good for pretty much whatever activity you're doing. If you're a new player, if your friend just started the game and he's like, I just got this exotic, it's called the Armamentarium, you'd be like, that's amazing, like that's gonna be good in so many things, because it is. Crucible, gaining 2 grenades, phenomenal. Gambit, 2 grenades, phenomenal. PvE, 2 grenades, especially when you have Oppressive Darkness mods in the mix right now. Absolutely incredible. And especially now that we just got the Traveler's Chosen, which you can see in the background gameplay, that is going to give you your grenades so much more often. You are going to want 2 grenade slots, because frankly, if you just have 1, you're not going to make the most of how much the Traveler's Chosen is giving you that grenade back. So this is just so good all around. It has to be on this list. But what stats should you be looking for? Well, with this, it's pretty simple. You want as much discipline as you can get. You want to be getting those grenades back. This is going to often be a part of very grenade-focused builds. You know, builds running double, enhanced ashes to assets to get your super energy from grenade kills, all of that stuff. So if you can get an Armamentarium with like 30 discipline, you are off to the races. That is going to be a very good thing to have. However, continuing on from there, we have the number 2 spot, and that goes to the Helm of Saint 14. Now, this is my personal favorite, to be honest. The exotic perk is Starless Night. Enemies that enter Ward of Dawn are blinded, while allies that pass through gain an overshield. Guarding with Sentinel Shield blinds nearby enemies. So, if it was just me and I had all my biases, I would put this at number 1. I absolutely love the Helm of Saint 14, and I will argue passionately to anyone I'm playing with to put it on if they're playing Titan and we're doing a high-level PvE activity like the Grandmasters. Like, if you want to farm this week's Grandmaster more efficiently and get even more exotics, if you get a good Helm of Saint 14, it's only going to help with that process. The fact that you gain an overshield for passing through the bubble, it cannot be overstated how important that is if you're doing high-level content, because otherwise, you go in the bubble, you're fine, you peek your head out, and you go back to no health, and you get one-shot by anything. Gaining that overshield is absolutely essential. And the blinding effect is also super useful. Every enemy in the game is programmed to rush into that bubble, it seems like. So if you can disable them while you resurrect a teammate, for example, you will absolutely be thrilled you have this effect. So I love it. It's great in PvE mainly. I think it's one of the best, arguably the best Titan exotic in PvE right now, because bubble is so good in PvE. But honestly, in PvP too, if you do like running bubble, the fact that you're giving all your teammates overshields while they're running through a bubble and weapons of light so they win every gunfight they face after they run through that bubble, it's pretty cracked there too. But what stats should you go for? Well, because this exotic is totally built around the super, it's pretty simple. Just go for as high of an intellect roll as you can possibly get. But moving on from there, we do have the number 1 spot, and despite my biases, I've got to give it to the Dune Marchers. Now, as you can see, I actually got a new one here. That's why it's not leveled up, and it has a pretty cracked stat roll. Now, this exotic perk here is Linear Actuators, increased sprint speed. Sprinting builds up a static charge. After melee attacking an enemy, that charge will chain damage to nearby enemies. So, this is one of the most used and one of the best Titan exotics for PvP, for the Crucible, just because of that increase to sprint speed. Like, that is going to be active all the time, and it's very, very useful. If you can get to the hallway before the enemy, you can aim down sights and wait for them instead of them waiting for you. That is incredibly powerful. If you can get to a flag before your enemies, if you can just get around a corner that much faster to avoid a grenade or something like that, it is going to help in just every aspect of the game. But also, the whole building up a static charge is pretty incredible too, and that makes these actually pretty good for PvE as well, because that is just like a static ability. You sprint for a bit, you see linear actuators on your screen, you punch an enemy, guess what? You get an electric chain that's going to deal a pretty significant amount of damage. It's going to kill most red bars, and it has a pretty far area of effect. So the fact that you can just punch a thrall after sprinting and kill all nearby thrall, yeah, that's actually quite useful. But not to mention that also comes up in the Crucible. You just get into random melee fights and you can kill guys around corners by randomly chaining to them. Or if you don't kill them, you get to fight the next guy who is significantly damaged from this completely free effect. There's a reason you see this being used a ton, and that's because it's very, very good. Now, what stats should you go for? Well, here, mobility is actually pretty good. That's going to improve your movement speed even more so. Recovery is, as always, quite good. And then discipline and intellect are good, but you probably want strength, because if you're getting up close and you are going to be making the most of that chain lightning, you probably want charged melees to actually kill enemies that you're hitting. And so guys, that is it for the list. Obviously, there are some great Titan exotics that weren't on here. I'm thinking the Actium War Rig is pretty good. You can't go bad with an absolutely cracked stat roll, but these are really the things that are going to be good in a variety of different activities, and you can't go wrong if you get a high stat roll of anything on this list. I hope you enjoyed this video, found this informative, and if you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus. That's linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.